let's roll forward 8 years from that time to today. We've got a Queensland Labor government that keeps the borders closed because they say their job is primarily to keep people healthy, and jobs will come at a later stage. How they've worked that out, I've got no idea. You've got a recalcitrant chief health officer who says that even people from the ACT can't get into Queensland because they're in the middle of New South Wales. Work that out. And then you've got this corruption shadow that's followed that cabinet terribly in the last 4 years, and yet the polls are telling us that Anastasia Palaszczuk is still in front. Please explain.
Look, I think firstly the big thing is that the LNP have not made the case for change over the last 3 years since the last election. They just haven't taken the fight to Labor strongly enough. And one of the big problems is their leader, Deb Frecklington, isn't well known enough by Queenslanders. She's announced some great policies in recent weeks, the upgrade of the Bruce Highway. She has a great policy platform of the new Bradfield scheme, which is about taking the waters of the rivers that flow to the Coral Sea and turning them inland. And that is a great project to build this state. But they're just running out of time. That's the problem. And if we turn to the government, the things you've just said, they are there. They are stark. I've been a strong advocate for the LNP to go after the inconsistencies, the lack of logic, the lack of process, the lack of transparency about some of the calls that have been made. I mean, we've got a federal deputy chief health officer who's actually trained in the field versus Dr. Young, who is a medical administrator.
Correct.
Now, the federal officer is saying there is no reason for this to be done, and yet we follow Dr. Young's advice and we're told it's the science. Well, who picked the 1st of November, that was the date that was being bandied around in the last week, as the date that the borders would be open with New South Wales? What was the science in that? Could it be that the election is on the 31st of the month? I mean, where is the science in some of these things? It's not there. These are quasi-political calls that are being made.
OK, let's look at the federal budget. We've got a federal government acting almost like a Labor government here. I think there were aspects of the stimulus, like the doubling of JobSeeker, that went way over the top and caused a lot of people not to seek work at a time when we had 1 million unemployed. And I think there are aspects of the budget that go over the top. It's hard to determine the difference between left and right at the federal level right now.
Chris, that's, I'm afraid, my sense of it as well, unfortunately. And I'll make this point that you cannot outspend Labor. And yet I watched the Federal Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, hand all this down the other night, and what do we see now? We're seeing Labor, of course, saying it's not good enough. Women got nothing, which is complete BS, of course. But you cannot outspend Labor. If we're going to repair this country, this is what we need to do. And these things are harder to do than just spend our money, apparently. The first one is we need to lower the cost of energy, electricity and gas, and we need to actually get it down to benchmarks with, say, places like Texas in the United States. Secondly, we need IR reform so that it is more straightforward and easy to employ people and pay people and get away from all this stuff about accusations of wage theft. Thirdly, we need less red tape and bureaucracy when you're running your business. And fourthly, we need to actually accelerate approvals, get them through far more quickly. And that's what I spoke about before with you. We need to actually unleash business. If we do those things that I've just said, business will do the rest. We don't necessarily need the extent of government spending or stimulus. We need to actually get out of the way of business and let people go and build their dream and employ people. And that is missing from all the discussion from, again, all sides of politics. They just won't deal with the critical issues.
Yeah, to give people money is one thing. To say, here, we're going to give you money so you can employ more people, that's well and good. But unless that business is given some kind of incentive to produce more than they normally would, it is a waste of time. The cliff will be delayed, but the cliff will come at one stage. And one quick thing, the Institute of Public Affairs is now saying, based on what we've heard from the federal budget, we won't pay off the debt, the $1 trillion debt, for 60 years. 2080. There are very, very young people around today who will be dead before that.
Chris, once upon a time, particularly say in World War II, we could borrow for the war effort for reasons of national survival, and then we went into a period in the 50s and 60s with long periods of uninterrupted economic growth. I mean, there was a credit squeeze or two in there and there was some recessions, but it was a boom period for this country. Now, can anyone in the federal treasury or in the federal government, any of the politicians, put their hand on their heart and say that's what's going to happen out of this? We're not going to see that unless we have a national vision to actually supercharge the economy. It's not going to happen by just throwing money at all of us. Nice for us to have that, but the debt is something that will not be dispensed with easily unless we get really significant economic growth. I get that the Prime Minister and the Treasurer want to try and stave off, a depression even, a recession certainly, but a depression even by doing this. That's fine, but there are so much more that needs to be done to actually get business going. And we haven't talked about China, for example. That's one of my biggest concerns these days. Strategically, we've really cheesed off our largest trading partner. And if they continue with the way they're going, where they don't buy our products, our produce, in the way they have for the last 30 years, we're in serious strife. And you just can't wave a magic wand and find new markets.
Another classic reason why more needs to be done to make Australian businesses more productive. Not just hire people, but become more productive.